Hi, this video is specifically to unpack the programming for the next phase that we'll have at CFDC starting, well, tomorrow, October 5th. Now, since we reopened, we've been prioritizing things within these different phases that have all lasted approximately 6 or so weeks, give or take. For each one of these phases, we've had certain things from a resistance training standpoint that we've progressed and we've prioritized. And then there's certain things from an energy system standpoint that we've done the same thing with. And so this video is just, well, really for two things. One is to spell out what the next 6 weeks will look like. And then we actually have some special guests that have some questions that we'll attempt to answer on the spot. So first and foremost, probably definitions. When we say resistance training, really what we're saying is anytime that there's a higher degree of motor control. And that's a really sexy couple of words to say, which is just to insinuate that when the muscle has to contract harder, and there's varying degrees of that, that's the priority. So for this phase, we can look at resistance training in a couple different ways. One is things that are a little slower, things where the type of contraction is a little bit heavier, a little bit higher. And so for those things, we'll have a front rack lunge step. We've progressed lunges in a few ways in the past, but this way will be really challenging, and I think that you'll like it. Secondly, we'll do some push press. So we've had some different variations from shoulder to overhead. This will just be the classic dip, drive, and press. Now, in addition to motor control stuff, we'll have some dynamic type movements. And what does that word mean? Well, it means that you'll transition from one position to another with a little bit more speed. And we've been really taking our time with these last few phases that we've been in to try to build to this point. So we've had things like a snatch grip deadlift. We've had things like a behind the neck snatch grip press. And when you mash those together, well, you probably, not probably, but our hope is that you have a greater degree of control to transition from one pose where your hands are down low to another pose where your hands are up high. So tomorrow on Monday, we'll introduce some complexes, and that's a nice fancy word to say that you'll have different variations of those dynamic movements, things like a clean, things like a snatch. And we'll put them together with a little bit higher rep, so the weight is a little bit lower. And we will continue to progress those until we feel more comfortable, and you feel more comfortable with a slightly heavier weight, but also that speed or dynamic nature that the Olympic lifts possess. When we talk energy systems, we have 3 tests that we're going to specifically train for. The first test is a 2K row. And a lot of times, just with the restrictions that we've had, we've said like 2K machine. But this time we're all specifically going to do the row. That means that on these days that we train this, we'll probably have a few different stations that we'll transition to. So there'll be like a row station where we'll spend, probably a 10-minute block there. And then there'll be some other stations that are complementary in nature, but not really the focus for the day. And to go off on a slight tangent, we'll have more days where we're all together. So the training, at least as of late, has been very dichotomous, where we have half of you on the rig, half of you in the open floor space, and we'll still have some days that are like that, but there'll be some days specifically where everybody's doing the same thing, which I think we really like as facilitators, as coaches, and I know that you guys like it as well. So the 2K row test will be one, and this is a really bold thing to say, but we've come up with the progression where we are expecting 100% improvement across the group. Now that's a pretty bold thing to say, but we feel pretty confident that if you show up for the training, regardless of your background, even if you're an Olympic caliber rower, that this progression will yield great results. Secondly, there's a test where we'll do a power clean and a burpee. The reps are very low. It's a 15-12-9 rep scheme. And we think this will be a great test for barbell cycling. We think it'll be a great test for aerobic stamina and even some muscle endurance with the burpees. And then lastly, we're progressing towards not just gymnastic work, which we've done, but stamina within that. So we're gonna have a test that we're pretty excited about, which is 5 minutes to accumulate as many reps as you can of a strict pull-up, or obviously different variations that we'll customize. We'll have a 2-minute break, and then we'll do another 5-minute period for as many reps as you can of a shoulder to overhead variation. And those are gonna be strict, meaning that a lot of people will be doing a strict handstand push-up. Some people will be doing a seated shoulder overhead press, so on and so on. So those are our 3 tests. Now from here, we'd like to introduce you to our friends that have joined us and those that have prepared a few questions for the programming schedule that we'll have. And we're really excited to get into that with them. So let's see here. The first question comes from the professor.
Yes, thank you for having me. My question deals specifically with the overall macro cycle of the year. Could you go into a little bit more detail about your long-term progression in terms of the phases that you've alluded to?
Wow, thanks for that. Great question. And we have an answer for that. We've thought, and the shelter in place gave us an opportunity to rethink exactly what a year should look like. And there's a finite number of ways that the body can move, and so we've broken up those different ways, whether it's squatting, hinging at the hips, pushing, pulling, and we've thought through progression for those. And we didn't admit this, right? This is good information out there for these things, but we've started from the simple to the more complex, things that you can control and stop on a dime, and then things where you really can't, like a snatch, like a clean, where at some point you're airborne, there's a change of direction, and there's a change of pose and position. And so we thought through in a calendar year that you can break up training into about 8 6-week phases. And so what we've done is for each of those movements, we're going to progress through them twice within a calendar year. From energy systems, there's really 3 ways that you can train. You can train the muscle to contract. You can train the blood to cycle through your body better. That's typically what we call like anaerobic type training. And then you can train the aerobic system, or your ability to sustain. And so throughout the year, we'll have different phases where for each of those energy systems, it's a little bit more of a priority. And just to unpack what this year has looked like, we've had a bias or a focus on the aerobic system up to this point. We're transitioning in this phase, which is the 4th phase, into a little bit more of an anaerobic phase. And then as we get through the year 2020 and into the year 2021, we'll have just a little bit of time where the bias or the priority is on the CP system, or those type of workouts where we're really focusing on contracting our muscle as hard as we can. So I hope that answers your question. Next, we'd like to welcome the party boy to the Q&A panel. Yeah, what's up? I'm just curious if it's going to be anything fun or new for this training. Anything that's exciting, anything just, I hadn't seen before. Party boy, thanks so much for being here, and I appreciate your question. There's a few things that will be new and exciting, by our opinion. One, we're going to introduce a landmine, which is a category of movements where you're not really pushing directly overhead, you're not pushing forward, but it's attached at the bottom, and we've come up with a lot of different variations, videos that you'll probably see Chad in demoing. But that'll be a new piece of gear and equipment that we use a lot, that we think you'll love. Secondly, we're going to have a full day devoted to just anaerobic training, which I don't know if that's considered fun for you, but instead of having days where we shift between strength and conditioning, it'll just be conditioning, but with different pieces and potentially some things that will rotate between. So instead of just being stuck with your one machine and one piece of gear, you may have a few different pieces of gear that you'll use for one interval or period of time and then transition to another. And then lastly, since we've been open, we've been on a very consistent schedule. You could almost say it's a blueprint for what Monday through Friday, Saturday looks like. This cycle will have one additional day, which will make it seem a little bit more varied. And so we hope that you'll appreciate all three of those things that we're doing this cycle. All right, our last guest is the Undertaker.
What about classic CrossFit? What about workouts that melt my face off?
Man, so good. I really appreciate your enthusiasm, your energy. I know exactly what you mean, right? Classic CrossFit is kind of this allusion to these workouts that have high intensity. And God, don't get me wrong, we love that stuff, but in balance. So we'll definitely have some workouts that will feel like classic CrossFit. And the one that comes to my mind is actually the 2K road test. If you think back to the journal that CrossFit had in the early days, this was one of the benchmarks that they had, and there is no purer, is that a word, of a test for anaerobic capacity, which is what high intensity really is, than 2K row. In addition to that, there'll be lots of workouts. There'll be an opportunity to really test the capacity for you to move blood around. But maybe a big difference is that it's not every single day, and we've done that intentionally. And quick little plug, if that is the type of training that you like, man, we love that too. And in fact, there's a program called Overboard, which is still customized and personalized, but it's workouts that look, feel, and smell like high intensity, high volume, classic CrossFit workouts. What we found over time is that a lot of the other aspects of somebody's life needs to be in balance for them to maintain that type of training long term, meaning sleep, food, stress, even training age has to be really in this perfect balance for you to get the juice out of that squeeze, so to speak. And what we found is in talking to the majority of our members, they don't need that every single day. Now, yeah, once, twice a week, I'd say let's go into the pain cave, as they call it, and have a good go at it. But for the rest of our training, it'll be balanced in order to support those days that we really should give it a good go. I just really miss workouts where we could share equipment and we could do team type training. Do you guys not like to have fun anymore? Thanks again for that question. I bet you're not the only one that feels that way, and guess what? We feel the exact same way. We love partner workouts. I think one of the best aspects of what we do, within the group at least, is that we get to share this experience, and no better way to share an experience than like share equipment or do a team workout. But our hands are tied. We're still in the middle of a pandemic, so we have to be respectful of social distancing. We have to assume that there's people in the group that still need to be respected as far as those concerns go. So I want you to know that from a logistics standpoint, we love that stuff, and honestly, it makes our job easier. So as soon as we can get some of that back in the mix, we will, but we're obviously not going to do it until every single person feels comfortable with that. So I get where you're coming from. We want to as well. We don't want you to get the impression that we don't like that stuff, or that we don't want to just socialize and throw parties and touch each other, because we totally do.
I need high rep workouts. I need hard workouts. Are these workouts going to be hard enough? Are you guys losing your edge? I need intensity. I need it every day. I need it all day. That's what I want from you.
Man, you motivate the hell out of me. And I appreciate where you're coming from, but the answer is no. We haven't lost our edge. In fact, the easiest thing I can do is give you a workout that's hard. And I get where you're coming from. To finish a workout that's really high in intensity, day in and day out, it feels like you've accomplished something. Like you're symbolically a Navy SEAL getting through another day of Hell Week. But day in and day out, it's not great training. So if you sit back and think through the way that we're going about this, it's very intentional. Nothing's by accident. That means that if you got through a workout and you don't feel like a pile of shit, it was on purpose. It means we meant to do that. If you got through a workout and you're on the floor, it meant that today was the day that you were supposed to feel like that. And it's a balance. I think that if we were to use an analogy, the easiest thing to do is overeat. The easiest thing to do is to consume food that tastes good and to do it at a quantity that's greater than what your body needs or needs to handle. But that doesn't mean it's good for you. What we're doing for the group, which is, just so you know, a really hard thing to pull off, is erring on the side of training that is balanced, challenging, but sustainable. And if at any point in time you feel like you're not getting exactly what you need, do you know what we say? We say good. The group isn't supposed to be this perfect expression for what you need as an individual. You probably do need some things in greater quantities. And that's why we've created the Tier 2. And even better, that's why we have a completely personalized Tier 1. So if you feel, all joking aside, like you don't have enough volume or you need more of certain workouts, we have the most talented staff in the city, probably the state, to give you exactly what you want. We're just going to ask you, why do you want that? And why is it important? And we'll have a conversation with you to make sure that we're on the right track. But to say that we're going to accomplish all of the goals of 2010 CrossFit and the program that we're doing today means that we haven't evolved, we haven't learned anything, and that we just want to entertain you with really tough workouts. And we're at a point where we confidently can say that we don't think that's in your best interest. So thank you, Undertaker, for your enthusiasm and your question. I know exactly where you're coming from, and I think you're probably not the only one that feels like that.
I've listened to the other questions that you had, and my question is, why, in your opinion, do you feel that there's other gyms that aren't progressing these movements, other gyms that aren't prioritizing long-term fitness the way that you've described, over the short-term high intensity and randomization that we might see in any other boutique studio?
I don't know. I won't assume to know how other gyms are programming. I can only assume that if they're at an earlier age in their maturity as a gym, that maybe they hadn't got to that point where people are getting burnout, or they haven't got to a point where they realize they're not actually helping people with that type of training. Two, it's honestly just easier to program like that. From a program design standpoint, it's much easier just to cycle through movements, but have it be high intensity. It's much more complicated to cycle through movements, to progress them, and vary the energy systems that you're targeting that day. So either they're ignorant of how to do that, or maybe at a subconscious level they think, I don't really want to do that, or they know all those things and they very intentionally said, we don't care. We want to focus on the competitive aspect. We want to focus on the intensity and the now of it, and that's not wrong. So I think probably a lot of it is just a byproduct that we've been open for a while, and the coaches plus myself have also been doing it for a while. So we're at a point in our life where we're not 22 anymore, and we want to keep doing this forever. And therefore, the program is more or less like an extension of the people and the age median that we have, which isn't 22, and us. So I don't know, man. I think that's just our vibe and the overall outlook that we have on this. And if you're into that, you'll love it. If you want total domination and competition, we can also do that. We just want to make sure that that's exactly what you need and what you want. And if that's the case, then once again, that's a pretty individualized thing, not something that we want to impose on the whole group at large. Gosh, thanks for all the people that came today with those questions. If you guys watching the video have any questions, myself and the coaches are totally accessible and have the answer for you. And once again, at any point in time, you feel like if it's not exactly what you want, Tier 2 and Tier 1 is our answer to making sure that it's always the kind of workout that you feel like you need based on your goals and based on your priorities. We're excited for this phase of training, and we'll see you in the gym.